Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of I Like to Read with me, your host, Rachel Polanski. For the long-time visual viewers, wow, I said that right, 10 pats on the back, you will notice that I may be in a slightly different location. We're playing around with things. I'm currently in my living room. We're playing around with the lighting. We are playing around with the upload date. We are playing around with the coloring in some instances. We're pretending it's for spooky season and not because the iPhone just weirdly had a glare. Yeah, it's for spooky season. What are your favorite spooky season things? Are you a big Halloween decorator? Do you like to read spooky books or watch spooky movies? Also, it's a lot harder to sit up straight when you're not when you don't have a chair back, and I don't even sit up straight when I have the chair back. So let's try our best for the next 18 minutes to do so. I'm in Los Angeles, so it doesn't exactly feel like fall. It doesn't exactly feel like spooky season right now, though it is actually pretty gray out and seems like we are entering the grayest time of the year, time of the season. So at least it's a little more sort of like fall and spooky, and well, I'm putting quotes around this because it's like I've adjusted to now if it's like under 70 degrees, I'm like, oh my God, it's cold. But it is sometimes. So that's that. What else have I been up to? I saw the movie Titan in theaters last weekend. It is a French film by the director Julie Dussault. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, maybe. And we actually were fortunate enough to see a Q&A with her after and be only 3 rows from her. So very up close and personal. And I think that really helped enrich the film. I loved her first feature-length film, which was called Raw. And I think it was famous for sort of, being like a groundbreaking horror, and people were like passing out in the audience. And while it was definitely graphic and, they're warning, there is cannibalism, there is human mutilation, it was very beautiful. And I think the director, Julia, did I mess it up already? I should have had this up right. Titan director. Julia Dussault. Forgive me. And Titan is her second feature. You don't need to have seen Raw to have seen this, but I think it really helps cement who she is, an auteur, as a director, the way that she plays with the male and the female gaze, the way that she plays with the body and the real visceral horror of the body and the human form and being trapped in this meat sack. I don't want to give too much away because it's definitely, while there's not a ton of dialogue, there is a decent amount of plot that moves forward. Again, it's French, it's weird, it's horrific in the sense that, yeah, there's murder, there's death, but it's really about this relationship between a young woman named, already forgetting her name, a young woman who's played by Agathe Russo, who's also a first-time actor, and you would never believe it. I guess it just is tantamount to also the direction that she was under. She is freaking fantastic and, really holds the film, no pun intended, under her body. She is literally holding it up. And so it's about a young woman who, for circumstances that I won't give away, has to leave her family, but she's also pregnant, and she is pregnant from a car. And I know that sounds freaking weird, but the way that, that it's shown in the film and the relationship to body and machine is very beautifully developed and looked at with nuance rather than just, oh man, it's a girl having sex with a car. I mean, it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes this year. Do I think it's going to be the best movie of 2020/2020? No, 2021/2022. Time will tell, but I think it's really different. I think it's something unique. I think it's, again, establishing a unique, I said that a lot of times, but establishing a really strong, solid female voice in horror, which we don't have enough of. So I think it is also more than just horror. It's really art cinema. I mean, I definitely wouldn't recommend it for everybody. If you're a horror fan, but you're only really into sort of B movies, it definitely has a lot more of that Dario Argento, weird, uncanny vibe to it. Don't Look Now, that kind of thing, but even weirder to David Cronenberg, next level. So that's what I enjoyed. I'm seeing the new James Bond tomorrow. At the time of recording, I will have already seen it, so maybe I'll give my thoughts on the next episode. This will be my first Bond in theaters because as of, 6 months ago, maybe around then, more or less, boyfriend/Jason, same person, showed me not the first Bond movie, but we watched our first Bond film, which I think was Goldfinger. And then we watched most of the Sean Connery ones. We watched a Roger Moore one. We watched some of the Pierce Brosnan ones. We watched most of the Daniel Craig ones. And now I'm finally ready and caught up as well as I need to be to see not Skyfall, what is it called? No Time to Die tomorrow, the long-awaited almost 3-hour epic saga. So we'll see how that goes. But you're not here for I like to watch. Maybe you are. Who knows? You are here to see what I like to read and what I've read this week. So our first book is called Dare to Know by James Kennedy. And while I don't often like to pull from Goodreads for my reviews and musings and thoughts because it's kind of just cheating, I do think the first thing that they have written for their description really frames this book perfectly when it says dark matter meets annihilation in this mind-bending and emotional speculative thriller in a world where the exact moment of your death can be predicted for a price. That's a really crazy tagline. As the title states, it has this sci-fi dystopian elements to it, but it's also very grounded in the idea that what if you could literally predict your death and knew the moment you were going to die? It's based on our main character who has developed this software, or helped develop it and helped been at the company since its origin, because this is a futuristic society where, yes, for a price, you can predict the exact date of your death. And would having that knowledge help or hinder your life? That's a really good question, and it presents all kinds of issues. And so we're presented with a present day plot where our main character has seemingly evaded his own death in a happenstance circumstance. So he is looking at that sort of as cheating the system, and through his cheating the system and seeing where he got there, we've seen the path that led him down this road and led down the effects of this on society, particularly the young woman who he was involved with at the time that he started in this company. He has still, while they're not together during the present day, he feels that his cheating death has become some sort of destiny that needs to lead him back to her, and she's the missing piece. So there's that love story, but also not even love so much as that like connection. The author does a really great job of capturing that connection with someone who, while in the present day you may no longer be close with, you still have a lot of shared history and intimate moments that you can't create with anyone else, and they hold a piece of yourself that nobody else can have, really not even you, because they hold the memories of you from that time from their view versus your view. So they hold something really special, and even if you're not together, whether that was a romantic or platonic experience, I'm sure you all have experienced that at least once in your life. So yes, there's that sci-fi element to it, but there's also a lot of deeply moving emotional connections and questions that I did not necessarily expect. I think it has a good mix. I think sometimes it's really hard to balance those. I think a lot of books try to do both, but they either fall too heavily into the sci-fi, fall too heavily into the relationship, and struggle to find that really perfect balance. Well, by no means this book is perfect, because I hate to, it's very hard to find a actual 5-star book. I rarely rate books 5 stars on Goodreads, and even when I do, I'm like, is that my absolute favorite book? I don't know, but it's a really good one, and it's unique, and it reads fast. And for those who like sci-fi, dystopian, adventure thrillers with more relationship heart to them, check this one out. And next we have The 9 Lives of Rose Napolitano by Donna Freitas. So speaking of sci-fi and thrillers, this takes the convention of a sci-fi novel and kind of flips it on its head, definitely focuses more on the relationship, but it asks the question, it's, kind of like Sliding Doors, is what if one moment changed everything and different branches show different lives? So we meet our main character, Rose, when she is confronted by her partner, Luke, and he wants her to take prenatal vitamins, and she's known her whole life that she doesn't want to be a mother, and she's made that very clear, but he is challenging that notion. So through that sort of catalyzing incident, there's 9 different lives that Rose can live. Some of those lives involve children, some don't. Some involve her staying with her husband and giving in to him. Some involve death, some involve life, some involve new relationships. What I think is really cool about this novel is not only does it show us, okay, but here's what could have happened, and here's what could have happened, is it interweaves those lives and shows how some lives are similar based on similar choices, but then also, it's sort of like a choose your own adventure where this path. Oh, but then one path is going to lead to live 7. One path is going to lead to live 9. And it shows, the different ways that one can not only live a life, but also different ways that one can be a mother. Particularly, each of the different lives allows Rose not only to explore her relationship with motherhood, but also her relationship with her own mother, her relationship to other children that she meets in the novel. It's a really cool idea, because it's not really like time traveling, and it's not really like the Rose and the other alternatives is aware of it. It's not like It's a Wonderful Life where she's above looking down on it. It's really just sort of like, what life is she meant to have? Can she be happy in all these other lives? What is important to her? What relationships should we keep? What should we not? Lots of existential questions. And Rose herself is just a very witty, grounded, realistic character. So I really enjoyed this one. Next, we have White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is a young adult psychological thriller that, first of all, I just have to say I love the cannabis representation in this because I don't talk about it a ton, but I do love to smoke weed, and I don't want to get too much into it, but I am hardly ever drink, and I do think that there is and continues to be a big stigma against marijuana, and this book really plays with the idea, especially for young people, of how we use marijuana to help ourselves or to hinder ourselves, how it can have larger impacts for different people depending on your circumstances, and also how it can be just as important a substance as alcohol, because Lord knows there's so many young adult novels and novels in general about alcoholism and the impacts of alcohol and someone just grabbing a glass of wine or whatever. And there's a lot of books about marijuana, but for someone to have it as sort of not a big plot point, but a part of their lives, and also sort of explore what it means to them in a deeper sense, more than just she likes to smoke, because our main character, Marigold, has gone through a traumatic experience, particularly related to bed bugs, which there was some haunting moments because I personally dealt with bed bugs a couple of years ago, and it was certainly traumatic. While I don't quite have the same PTSD as Marigold does, I can definitely relate to some of her things. So her and her family are moving to this random suburb in the Midwest in a situation that seems almost too good to be true. They've been given this free house in exchange for her mother to have a residency on Maple Street. You may recognize the title as an intentional reference to the famous Twilight Zone episode, The Monsters on Maple Street, which I probably butchered that title, but we read the script, maybe the story, in 8th grade. And since then, it's always stuck with me. Again, it's like how the real monsters are the humans, and we have these imagined, perceived scapegoats in the sense of this Maple Street fictional town. There's a lot of questions about larger racial implications, about larger redlining and stratospheric sort of, putting people in certain areas and then building them up in certain ways and giving them certain resources, like the larger community impact. There's also a lot of exploration also of sibling bonds, which I found really nice. I found, even though this was a young adult novel, it does deal with some serious themes in the sense of trauma and addiction and dependency and gentrification, and lots of themes, while also keeping a sort of spooky, is there a ghost and is there a demon, paranormal activity vibe to it. So a lot going on, but again, it all works. Maybe the theme of this episode is books that play with different types of genres and really work well together, because while I always like the books I talk about on this episode, I think a lot of the ones in this do a more than fantastic job. So especially for spooky season, you got to check out White Smoke, cannabis lover or not. Next, we have Beautiful World, Where Are You? By an author you may know named Sally Rooney. I have read Sally Rooney's other books. Do I think she's like the best author ever? No, but do I think her books are rather enjoyable and something familiar, but also slightly different in the sense of how no nonsense and plain they are. If you've read Sally Rooney and you're familiar with her work, or if not, she is a young Irish woman who maybe is my age, maybe a year older or two, definitely still in her 20s and writing these international bestsellers. And she likes to just pick apart the lives of young people in Dublin. And now these young people are typically white. They are typically upper middle class or working class, but definitely not poor. They typically are able-bodied and straight and don't have many actual external issues, but internally, oh boy, are they a mess. And so I think going in without self-awareness, recognizing that, yes, these are privileged white people, we're going in with that. Their problems are, does this boy like me or not? In the case of our main characters, one of them is getting over a breakup and flirting with her best friend's ex. And then the other one is, she's a famous author, but she's afraid to go outside. And so while they might sound insufferable, I think they're really good, and Sally Rooney is good at using them as vessels to translate the sense that, just because everything looks great on the outside doesn't mean that everything is all right inside, and recognizing that privilege while reconciling with these problems. There is a matter of factness that doesn't, that lends to a sense of not glorifying it, but really keeping it grounded. This one, there's not a ton of darkness, I would say. There's no real death and murder, but there is a sort of darkness in the sense of yeah, you can have everything on paper, but what if it's not enough? And how do we fill this malaise? And then also the female friendship and the dynamic, again, going back to what I mentioned earlier about someone who you may not be as close with in present day, even if that's a platonic relationship, but still trying to keep it up because they hold that piece of you from the past that's so important. So that idea is played with a lot here. So if you've read her other works, if you haven't, this is definitely a lighter read, a breezier read, and, something to take your mind off of things and take a little trip to the UK. And last but certainly not least, we're ending another episode of Spooky Season with another horror thriller novel, The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I love this one because it definitely played with my expectations. I thought I knew where things were going, and while I was right some of the time, and other times I was not right. So our story plays with different timelines. We meet our main character, Ted, who, for all intents and purposes, seems like he has not only been through a trauma as a child, but is a slovenly, weird adult and has got some stuff going on. And it seems like he has also kidnapped a young girl who we find out has gone missing 10 years earlier and has kept her captive. But all is not what it seems. That's all I want to say about that. I will say that it played with the idea of psychological horror and particularly like psychological disorders in a really unique and interesting way. There's also the perspective of a cat, which I found really fun because it wasn't just like, meow, meow, I'm a cat. It was like she was another character, but as a cat, and the way that she plays a part in the story was also totally unexpected, did not see coming. I think it adds heart and understanding and twists that are not just there for twists, but again, a really cool blending of that horror thriller, keeps you on your toes, what is going on, while also having purpose and understanding for these characters. As Goodreads said, because we started with Goodreads, we'll end it with Goodreads. In the dark forest at the end of Needless Street lies something buried, but it's not what you think. Find out and let me know. All right, that is the end of another episode. As always, let me know what you're reading, watching, listening to, eating, whatever. Let me know what you're doing. Until next, follow me on all the sites, Goodreads. Leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. I'll love you forever. And until next time, stay reading. Bye.